Yeah, that's recording now. So, mate, let's start with I have to start with Melbourne Croatia. That club's still in my heart, even though I've been living in Sydney for most of my life. I know the way you talk in interviews, it's in yours. They gave us a real heartbreaking run, Melbourne Croatia. They had the top teams, and they could never really do it on the big day. 3 grand finals that they lost, and then the 94-95, you play Adelaide away in the grand final. The team that had beaten us, or team that had beat Melbourne Croatia twice in the grand final in Melbourne. I just wanted to sort of start there and just get your, if you can remember what you felt in the lead up to that game, given the history of Melbourne Croatia and how they couldn't really get it done on the big day against Adelaide City, the nemesis on the big day, away in Adelaide. Like, what were you thinking? What was the team thinking? Were you confident? Were you not confident? Can you remember how you were feeling in the lead-up?
Well, we played against Adelaide City the year before, and they beat us with that goal by Damien Murray, from a distance. And it was, we were confident in Melbourne as well. It was one of those things where, after Melbourne, Croatia, being a fan for that many years and going through all those moments, you start to think that it's not meant to be. You got some sort of a curse or something like that. But, we were confident the year before that. We were confident that year because we were the best team in Australia, on paper and whatever, because we were minor premiers. I think we were both years minor premiers, like 94 and 95. So, across the whole season, we had accumulated the most amount of points. And so we were always confident. But you know what it's like in games like that, it depends. It depends on luck sometimes as well. And it wasn't on our side. And before the Adelaide game, obviously it's like every other game. Every other big game, you're nervous and you just want it to start, So with football and sport in general is you can do everything right and prepare for it, and something goes wrong for you on that day, or something goes right for the other team, like a decision or something like that, and it changes the whole. You might be the better team, but it changes the whole scenario,
The key moments, the key moments. Yeah. They go either for you or against you. And then I've heard you talk about that win and what it meant to you in interviews, which is really, it was really cool for me to hear, because I know how much it meant to me and all the Melbourne Croatia fans, but someone like, you played at the biggest level in World Cups and yada, yada. And you can feel in your voice when you talk about that it was big. Can you just tell me, like, for the purpose of this book, what did that mean to you? Given everything that you've done in your career, how do you explain that victory, first Melbourne Croatia Melbourne Knights grand final victory?
That victory for me was, well, you have to think, for somebody who follows, a Man United or a Leeds or, Chelsea, that's their club, from day one, or whatever, anywhere around the world. And Melbourne, Croatia for me was that. There was no bigger club for me in the world apart from Melbourne, Croatia, I would say, As a kid growing up, that was my dad's, ever since I was a little kid. My dad was, took me to the games at the old Olympic Park and, number 1 and 2. And, ever since I know, and my dad was very passionate about, Melbourne, Croatia, and he was like a foundation member and all that stuff. And that was basically, my goal in life was to play for them, and even that wasn't guaranteed, and what it was is, after following them as a kid and then getting into the first, they were all like big, for me, they were big moments, getting into the first team, being called up, playing in the first team as a regular, and that was a huge thing for me. And alongside people like Biškić, I played with Biškić, who was, who was a legend of the club, and I, having followed him since, I was ball boy when he was playing,
Yeah. Yeah.
at Olympic Park and that, and then having to, getting the opportunity to play alongside him. These are all legends of the clubs who
Yeah.
I grew up with, grew up, supporting, and
Yeah.
so that grand final for me is, people might say it's the Australian League. It's, you can't compare with England or with whatever, Croatia, Scotland, wherever. But for me, in my heart, it was the most important for me.
Wow. Wow. So it was given everything that you've done, you can say that was the most important.
For me, yes. For
Wow.
me, yes.
Wow.
Because at that time, that was like, even now when I think about it, in me as a, because it was personal. It was a real personal thing.
Yeah.
Having said the whole thing that I just said before,
Mm.
it was very personal for me. And
Yeah.
you go to clubs, and later on you go to clubs and you respect the clubs and all that, but it's not your
Yeah.
upbringing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do
Not
the
in your
best,
heart.
and, you're
Mm.
professional about it. But this
Mm.
this this was like a personal thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty. That's big. Hearing you say that. Um, I want to jump to Dinamo. So, and I've heard this story. You've shared this story in many interviews, but I'd like, if it's okay, to share with me for the purpose of this book. I mean, it's a pretty interesting way that happened. Yeah, that Dinamo opportunity got created with Tujman and so on. Can you just sort of walk us through that?
Basically, after that grand final, there was a few offers that came in from. There was one from Japan, because we went after that. We played against Jubilo Wata, and we beat them 3-1, I think, and I scored 2 goals that day, and actually 2 really nice goals. And so they were interested. I had an offer before that from Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think I was at training after one of those. Went to training after one of those. Like, I think it was after the Japan games or whatever. And I remember coming home from training, and a friend of ours called up, and I answered the phone. A guy called Karlo Filipovic. He was Marko Filipovic's dad, which I grew up with. And he was HDZ in Melbourne, and he said that the president was there, and I knew he was coming, but that was all really. And the president was there, and he wanted to meet up with me and my family, my parents, yeah. And that was that. We met up at Vlado's in Melbourne, in Vlado's restaurant, the what do you call it, the steakhouse, yeah. And that was that. And then he said that he wanted me to play for Croatia Zagreb at the time it was, but he was creating a club. He wanted to distance himself from the communist name of Dinamo, and get people to sort of people more for outside of Croatia to sort of recognize Croatia is not a communist country anymore, type of thing.
Put her on the map, on the world map. I mean, I can't imagine what was that like, having the Croatian president who was a hero to all of the Croats all around the world, having dinner with you and your parents and asking you to can you try to put that into sort of words? What was that like for you?
That was like, for us, and the war was still on then at the time, and he was a big hero for us, for our family, for Croats worldwide, and that was just an honor, massive honor for me.
Yeah.
To be. I can't really explain it in words,
Yeah. It's a pretty. I don't know if any other football player that got recruited by president. I think that's you're probably alone in that.
Maybe.
So tell us, Crow was at the time you were playing. It was crazy times there. The war was going on. or it might have been just finishing in Crow, but it was flaring up in Bosnia, whatever it was anyway. But it was a hotbed and political situation and the war and all the rest of it. And you're there playing football. What was that like, playing football in that part of the world, given everything that was going on?
Look, it was very different to Australia, that's for sure. You know, being raised in Australia was different. You know, the Croatia had been in communism for 50 years, and the mentality was different. You know, it was similar, but also different. You know, similar mentality as in because they were Croats, and we were raised in that sort of a way in Australia. But they were. You know, they were also different. You know, being raised in a system which was a communist system, so there was a lot of corruption around. You know, there still is corruption, but in those days it was a little bit like the Wild West. You know, there was a lot of people, soldiers who had weapons. There was people who were, you know, criminals who had weapons, and you know, everybody. It was a bit of a, you know, it was a nice time, but also it was, you know, when I think about it now, I was only 19 at the time when I left, and when I think about it, it was, you know, it's surreal a little bit. It's hard for me to think that that I went there. I was by myself here the whole time and whatever, and it was a bit, you know, it was a very surreal time.
Yeah. I can only imagine. That must be like a movie, thinking back on that. And there's so many things I know that happened during those 3 years, but the one I wouldn't mind just getting you to talk through is that Dinamo Partizan game. I think it was Champions League qualifier. You'd played away first leg, which you lost 1-0, if I'm right, and then the return leg in Zagreb. Can you just sort of take us through that? What was it like in the lead up to that match? Walking the streets in the lead up, the game itself.
The first match or the second match?
The second one.
Second one, yeah. Well, that was a bit of a thing was that was the first game since the war that played any Serb or Croat team in football. You know, they played other sports, but they didn't play in football, and so everybody was still full of, you know, emotions over here. You know, having been on the receiving end of a, you know, what do you call it? A war, you know. And what happened was the first game, obviously we went there and we actually played really well. We actually deserved to get something out of it. And we had, you know, we hit the post, we hit the crossbar and all that sort of stuff. But we should have won it, you know, at least we should at least put 2 goals in for sure. And then they went up the other end and scored. So it was a 1-0 thing, and it was a lot of pressure on us coming back here, and I remember, you know, people in the streets would be coming up saying that we should like it was a must. We had to win and all that. It was a lot of pressure, you know.
So it was more than a football game, yeah.
Yeah. It was larger than just a football game, and so yeah, again with the Melbourne Knights thing, you know, it's a one-off thing. You don't know, you know, you can have a bit of luck, you might not have luck, and you know, there's always that element of doubt when you go into a football game. You don't know what's going to happen. So got out there, and you know, it started going our way. It was just a free for all. You know, in the end, it was 5-0, and it was just a great. You know, it's a game that's very, very rarely you can sort of experience that type of game.
And how'd that feel, beating a 5-0 at home, knowing what it meant to the people?
For us, it was just a big relief. You know, football in general is a relief. You know, because you've got high expectations, and if you match them, it's not. I wouldn't say it is happiness, but it's more relief. You know, because. If you're expected to win games every week in, week out, if you don't win it, then it's disappointment. But if you do win it, it's more of a relief than happiness, I would say.
It's funny that I'm going to sort of jump to something a bit here. It's funny that you use the word relief. That I've used that word in the book because Serena Williams, it doesn't matter Pep Guardiola. It doesn't matter the sport. I can think of an NFL coach right now, but his name's not coming to me. That's the word they all use. They don't say when they've won a big thing. When Serena won the record equaling Wimbledon, they don't say that they're happy and excited. They use the word relief. I reckon there's something interesting about that. There's something interesting about that. It's almost like, I think you probably said it, elite athletes, when you do something that you expect, you're not going to be excited because you just did it because you expected it. Yeah.
Yes. And that's exactly what football, that's why people, it's different being a fan. It's different being an amateur than to being a professional, because once you're a professional, you're getting paid a lot of money to get the job done, and if you don't get a job done, there's a high expectation of yourself and there's a high expectation of others around you or whatever. And if you don't get the job done, it's a huge disappointment. But if you do get the job done, it's expected, and you start expecting more of yourself. And, I don't think you don't get as many. The word relief is the best thing because, it's the best way of describing it because, as I said, you expect to win it. So it's not a big deal when you do win it. But when it's more of a relief, as I said, that you've got the job done, more than, it's not really, it's like you get ecstatic or something.
Joy or happiness. Yeah, there must be something to that. That must. I think that that's a common personality trait for elite athletes, that they have such high expectations of themselves. That's what sort of drives them. That's what keeps driving them. But that's also the thing that doesn't allow them to feel joy. That's a weird sort of thing.
Hey, you know what? That is a great analogy because there's not much joy in the world of football at the higher level. It's more relief.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that sort of an existence, when you exist around winning or losing after, a long time of being in that sort of an existence, you start to think, what am I just, it's not, there's not much happiness there, put it that way.
Yeah.
It's just relief,
And that's the price.
Relief
that's the
or
price.
disappointment.
That's the price you pay for being at that level. Yeah. That seems like it's at the price you have to pay. Because, like I said, I've never, it's very rare that you'll hear an elite athlete or elite coach really be excited after they won something. It's not. It's just not. That's interesting.
Yeah, because there's so much, especially, these days, there's so much pressure from external, internal, whatever, money, people, all sorts of sides where, and the lead up to these sort of things, they're very stressful, they're very stressful.
Yeah.
And what happens is, basically, if you get through it and you do okay, you're relieved,
Yeah. So then you get on to
it's just the same as like somebody who's a perfectionist.
Yeah.
He's not happy with mediocrity, or he's not happy if there's some little detail doesn't go right in what he's doing or whatever, he or she, and it's not really a happy existence for me. That, you know what I mean? It's not really happy. I wouldn't say happiness.
Did you? Yeah, go on. Sorry. Go on.
What are you going to say?
Did you think of yourself as a perfectionist when it came to football?
In football, yes. Nothing else.
Nothing else. You were a perfectionist.
So I was like in that, like everybody says to me about the Liverpool game with the 4-0, and I honestly, I think I didn't have that good a game.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Because that's only one part of the game, is finishing, which is great, and everybody sees that, and the outside world just concentrates on that. But when you're a professional, you've got a different elements to a game as well. You've got so for example, if I'd scored, I don't know, a hat trick and basically, which sometimes it happens, knew nothing of it, 3 tap-ins, or I just say created 3 goals, like dribbling a couple of players, had a really good game. For me, I would say the second bit is more satisfying than the first one.
Yeah. Because you met your standards.
Yeah, and that's what fulfills me. That
Yeah,
fulfills, you know what I
you
mean?
met
It's
your
not just
standards. Yeah,
scoring a goal. There's different ways of scoring goals. There's
yeah,
different types of players who score different types of goals. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's not just about that. It's that whole fulfillment. What fulfilled me was, doing all of the things
yeah,
that I, did, and I did that in other games where I didn't score.
yeah.
And, you know, that's just,
Yeah,
you know,
that made you more fulfilled even when you didn't score. So it's more it's not about what grabs the head.
yeah, yeah. And then that's the thing, like if you're week in, week out, every training session like that. So you put a lot of pressure on yourself
Yeah,
in every training session to be the best, to do, to be the best. That's
yeah.
what you.
So my chapter one is titled Obsession. And one of the guys that I've interviewed, do you remember Craig Johnson, the Liverpool guy?
Oh, of course I know Craig. I
Yeah,
know
of
Craig.
course you would. It's a stupid question. I know that you would have. But anyway, so Craig was one of the guys, and it sort of I was playing with the idea of it, but he after his conversation, it made me that's the first chapter. You might have heard his story, how he went as a 14-year-old, didn't make it. The coach at the time told me literally to fuck off. Jack Charlton said he was the worst player ever. 14-year-old, one-way ticket, didn't have a way home. North England winter. And he just didn't give up, and he drew out a soccer court on the car park, and he'd come up with these drills and just drilled 8 hours a day, drilled 8 hours a day, drilled 8 hours a day for months and months and months, and then it sort of all went from there. And I don't know, just hearing him, and he told that story way better than I just quickly
Yeah,
done
of
it.
course.
But he was obsessed, and that's another thing that that relief thing. This as well, I think is a common thing when I read and hear people talk at that elite level. It's not about wanting it or loving it or trying really hard. That those words aren't strong enough. They're obsessed. That's
No,
my
no,
opinion. Huh?
no, that's true. Look, there
Yeah.
are some people. There are some people who make it, but they're not obsessed. They make
Uh-huh.
it to some sort of a level. But then they're not. I wouldn't say they have to be full on hard workers and all that. But
Yeah.
depends on what type of people there are. There's people who are more emotional. That they react through emotionally through things, and then there's people who are more sort of with their head. They think about things, like
Yeah.
players.
Yeah.
So me, I was the more sort of emotional type.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with
Yeah.
football and I loved it, and I had a player of mine, a guy called Goran Juric, who played with the national team Croatia. He started when he was later, like
Mm.
older. He was probably about 15 or something like that, and he started getting more serious about it.
Mm.
And so whether he was obsessed, no, he was sort of, you know, doing other things, with his
Yeah.
mates and all that sort of stuff. And then,
Mm.
he'd be training on the side and that. I was like, from the age of 3 or something, I was just every single day in the backyard with my,
Yeah.
by myself, then with my dad when he came home from work, and then going to the games on the weekends. And then, I was begging him when I turned 5, I begged him to take me to training to Melbourne
Yeah.
Knights. And he took me. I was 5 years old. It was under nines, and it was Mark Silic's age group. Mark
Yeah.
Silic was there,
Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
and Mark Silic's dad was the coach. And because up until then, I was just by myself training in the back, or my dad, which he would always let me win.
Yeah.
And I went to Maribyrnong at the training ground, and I took the ball and I started dribbling because I was quite good, like even that, because I spent so much time with the ball. I started dribbling. The other guys were tall, like bigger than me and that. And then I lost the ball. And I remember the day, and I lost, somebody took the ball off me, and I'd never experienced that. And so I sat down in the middle of the training session and I started crying, And Stephen, not Stephen, Mark's and Stephen's dad, he goes to my dad, maybe better bring him next year, and I did. And a year later, I was every single day in the backyard, every single day, training and whatever. And then the year after, I came for the and
That's an
82.
awesome story. And with your okay, I'm going to grab big parts of this conversation for the book, but that's definitely a story that's going to, I already know it's going to go in. And then the other thing that makes me think of you when I say obsession, I've heard you say this story at the AIS. By the way, I knew a few of the boys that were in your AIS class. There's so many crossovers that we had growing up. It's bizarre that in some ways it feels like I know you, in other ways you're the football. It's weird. It's weird. But I knew a few of the boys in your AIS. What was it, 92, 93?
Yeah.
Yeah, Richie Plesser, Rudan, and Jim Nikas. I don't know if you yeah. I remember either you or someone was saying in an interview at the AIS that you were, whether they were using the word obsessed, but it was sort of sounding like that. And then you just sort of kicked the ball against the wall all day, all night. You're driving your roommate nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give us that story?
Well, basically, I was just so obsessed. I wanted to get better. I wanted to improve, but it wasn't something, again, it came from within. It didn't come from, me thinking, I'm not that type, where I think, I'm going to tick this down. I've got to do this. I don't do that. It just comes from within, and I wanted to get better with my touch. So then I devised the thing, and I thought, I've got training, whatever, once a day, twice a day or whatever. And I wanted, when I was not training, to also work on something. So I would be in my room, and it was a small room, and the bed was up against the wall. It was a single bed which was up against the wall. It was a brick wall, and I devised a way of like a little game where I'd have to hit the ball over the bed and then catch it with my legs, obviously, like with my touch, and then hit it again against. And the whole time the ball had to stay in the air. That was the sort of thing. And then, at first it's all over the place. And then after, 6 months or whatever of doing that almost every day, your touch gets really good, And now nobody had to go on, at first I'd start off with just keeping it up. Then I did 2 touch. So I wasn't allowed to take more than 2 touches. Then I went to 1 touch, 1 touch on the wall over the bed. That means there is so many in that little exercise. There's so many little things that are so important in football, like, first of all, your touch when the ball comes back to you, your first touch has to set you up for the next touch. It has to be a perfect touch to get to the next, to make the other one be a good one. Then second, all the weight of the pass or the hit on the wall has to be perfect, so it bounces somewhere around your area. And there's so many like minute little details in that little exercise, which is like essential for football.
Can you try to guess how many kicks against the wall every day you did?
It's very, very difficult. I'll be there for hours, depends on when I started getting tired. I'd be sweating in the room, and people would be like sometimes 2:00 in the morning,
Wow.
And like the guy next to me, he wasn't happy with it. He wasn't happy about it, but he was all right, like I was fucking hell, I think it was Senna or something, and he go. But they knew, they knew I was doing that. Like, it depends. Like, everybody was different. Some people were watching television. This guy was doing that, other things or whatever. And
you were obsessed.
I just was obsessed because at the start when I got into the AIS, Ron Smith the way I got into, I wasn't even supposed to go to the AIS. I was second choice. There was a first choice guy, another Croatian guy he was from Perth. Ron Smith called him, and I was on standby. And I think he didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave Perth. And so I was called up, and then I remember the first training session we had, we were stretching afterwards. It was in the indoor hall, and he told us, Ron Smith said to us, statistically, he said, maybe 20% of you guys, and at that time we were, the best youngsters in the country, maybe 20% of you guys will end up being actually making a living out of football, on any level. It didn't have to be, to just be a professional, yeah. And I remember saying to myself, I'm gonna be in that 20%,
Yeah. I've heard you say that on a podcast recently. Yeah. You said that you made that promise to yourself. Yeah. Whatever it took. There's some awesome stories about obsession. Another topic I'm talking about, I wouldn't mind your opinion on. I have a view. I don't know 100% for sure, but I think that another common personality trait with elite athletes and elite coaches, they're very process driven. So, like,
what is that?
Process driven is like being methodical. Like you do things in a way that's the same way every time. Like when you hear, for example, a Pep talk about a match day and what happens before, during, after, it's like very habitual. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that just happens. Doesn't matter where you're playing. Doesn't matter who you're playing against. Doesn't matter where you're coming on the table. Doesn't matter how you're feeling. Doesn't matter what injuries or not. He just follows the same sort of thing. And I hear that a lot from these interviews, that they have a certain way, the certain thing that they follow every time, and they don't sort of change from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree with that, because and so what was the question?
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about that, and whether you think about yourself like that, and if you do, what was your processes like? Did you do a certain thing the same way every time on game day? Did you do a certain thing every time the morning of a game? Or what were your sort of processes?
Look, with football, you don't, depending on how things are going. Like I used to do a few things. Like I always used to put my left shin pad on before the right shin pad, for example. That's what I used to do. That's like a superstition type of thing, right?
Yeah.
I didn't like changing things too much. I always liked to do the same sort of a thing. Whether that meant anything or I didn't, I don't know. But in terms of like training and things like that, for me, like just say like in a game, if things don't go your way, like you're losing 2-0 or something, the only thing you have in your locker there, you can jump around like a whatever, like, and start doing rain dances and all that, but nothing's going to change. All you have is all of your training that you've done so far, and all you can do in those situations is constantly keep doing those things. You understand? There's no other alternative, really. It's what you've been taught, like as a team, and not just as a team, in like as a player. All of those things, you make the same runs every time. You make because if you change something, there's because you've got to a point where that is the best way of going about what you do. You know what I mean?
Even if it's not working in that game, you still stick to it. You still stick to it, trusting it. Yeah.
You have to do that. And that's the same. That's what I like about Ange Postecoglou, for example, even when he's losing, he's still, and that's a big mental thing, like he's willing to sacrifice losing for not changing that. And I agree with that. No, it's not, I don't think he's willing to sacrifice losing. It's just that the belief in that sort of a way of playing that he's given them, it's sort of, you can't say, oh, it's not working, let's do something else. But people who are looking at it from the side are thinking, everybody's a fucking what do you call it? Expert coach nowadays. He should have put this guy on, he should have put that guy on. It's easy to speak when you don't have any consequences.
So when you saw Ange keep playing that high line, and his way 2 men down away against Chelsea. I think they got pumped 4-0.
No,
if
I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have done that, because those circumstances had changed so much.
Yeah, right.
That for me was, I wouldn't have done something like that.
Right. Okay.
But if it's a normal circumstances, whatever, if it's a normal circumstances, you're losing a game, but you've got 11 men. It's not like you got 9 men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to keep going at what you do. That's the best way for me. And at the end of the day, because the weird thing is that especially these what are they? What is it? Premiership manager, whatever, that the game. The people are all playing that, and they all know what's the best thing to do these days. And they've all they're all great generals after the battle.
Yeah.
But what happens is if you've trained a same and people all they do nowadays is they talk about formations. Formations means nothing in football. It doesn't mean much at all because football is constantly changing. You can start off with a formation or whatever. If the ball goes out there, you're not going to stand in formation. You've got to constantly move every split second. And that formation could be, it could start off with a 4-4-2, but it ends up with a 5-4-5-1 or, it keeps changing. And football, it's, if you get somebody to find some sort of a stability in that keeping changingness, and everybody knowing their jobs in every one of those moments, that is what and I agree with Ange in that sort of a way. If their philosophy is to play like that, you play it like that even when it's bad,
Good, bad or ugly, rain, hail or shine. Yeah. Even if on that day it doesn't work, but you got to trust that will work over the long term.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I agree with that.
And that's the way to build trust in something, that you keep with it. Like if you're to abandon it just because it didn't work on that day, how do you trust it when you need it?
And not only that, like what I don't like is just say you're playing against an Arsenal and you're normally playing, I don't know, a 4-4-2 or a whatever formation, and then you're playing against Arsenal or whatever, Man U or Nesnam. You change it because you want to play defensively. I'm not really into that.
Yeah. So stick to the process. So you're a believer in that as well. I also had a chance to talk to Shuker. I was asking him specifically. I don't know if you remember the penalty he took in the '98 World Cup against Romania. For some reason, that one always sticks in my head when he had to retake it because Boban ran into the box too early. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah.
Yes.
And he put the fingers on his. Yeah. Sorry.
The pulse, when he was taking his own pulse.
Yeah, I was asking about that. So, and he was just breaking down. I'll go, how do you handle that pressure? Not only one penalty, 2 penalties, World Cup, the whole world's watching, yada yada. And he broke it down in a way that was just so amazing to hear. So the first thing that he does, he breaks the goal up into 9 things. The top left is section 1, then section 2, then section 3, and so on. So he picks a number first. That's the first thing in his head. And then the second thing in his head is he does the pulse or breathing or whatever he has to do to get the heart rate down and just be present and not allow the mind to go in different things, just to be in the present moment. And then he goes up to the ball, picks the exact spot on the ball, picks the exact spot on the boot, hits it with conviction, and and that's it. End the process. So the way he talked about it, it was like he was making a bread roll. It was just it was a machine, that just produced bread rolls. That's how it felt to me when he was talking about it. It was just a process, repeat. Doesn't matter if you're on the training ground, doesn't matter if you're in a match, doesn't matter if you walk up. It's just the same process. Do you have something like that, like when you're taking a pen or when you're taking a free kick, where you just go into this sort of zone and you just sort of follow steps 1, 2, 3?
No.
Yeah. So it was more just the tactical, just make the same runs, just do the same things that you were taught.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard anybody explain something like that.
Okay.
that way, you know. But I think it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
But I've never heard anybody do it that way. Okay, they pick a spot, you know, like they pick a spot or they whatever, or they wait for the goalkeeper or do something like that. Because what he did there with that one, I think he did a little jink before as well, before he hit it. You know, he always did that sort of to get the
Yeah.
goalkeeper to move
To move.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But no, as I said, I'm more of a feeling type
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
I'm not a guy who's I don't really calculate in
Yeah.
like mentally those things. It was the whole thing was more the whole football experience for me was more of a feeling one. It
Yeah.
wasn't really
Yeah. There's
like
different
thinking.
personality types and this is something that I talk about as well. You got thinky people that are very
Yeah.
analytical. You got emotional people, and then you got what's called gut people, who are all sort of gut instinct, gut feel, just really quick decisions. And there's no right or wrong, but just that's interesting to hear you say that, because you've used that word a lot.
Yeah, it's a different type of people, you know, like, oh, my son is very, you know, he's very methodical like that. He's
Yeah.
different that to me. I was more of a, you know, feeling type, but like
Yeah.
I felt the situation and whatever and moved like in that way. I didn't really think.
Yeah.
That's what I said. There's different types of people, different types of players who you know.
Yeah. And what about this sort of thing of mindset? Like, I don't know if you sort of do much reading, but it's been written about more and more in sort of books, and this whole, how do you manage your head and your thinking, and how do you get into the right mood, and how do you stay present, and how do you pick yourself up after a mistake? You know, how do you make yourself feel the right emotions? Did you sort of do anything? Was that something that you thought about at all when you were playing?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a lot of that sort of stuff. The thing is that for me, the most important trait as a footballer is not skill, it's mental toughness.
Yeah.
Because if you you can have all the skill in the world, but if because of some reason you can't show that, if you make a mistake and then the rest of the game you're hiding from the ball, or you have to be mentally strong. It's better to have a mentally strong player than it is a skillful player for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
You know,
That everyone.
and that means going through. But the only way to do that is to actually feel it on your own skin, as they say in Croatian. There's no other way. You have to go through those situations, and test yourself and whatever. It's not like, yeah, I'm mentally strong, and then what I mean. It's not like that. You've got to go through the bad times and come out the other end. It's just a process.
And how did you do that? Like, you had some tough times. The thing that comes to me as I say that is you later part of Dinamo Zagreb, and I'm sure you had 1,000 million of them. How did you come through that when you felt it on your own skin? What did you do for yourself to get through those?
Again, is the only thing is you have to. What helped me out of a lot of it is because if everybody around you is doubting you and is having a go at you, and it's not like your local, your best mates and that, it's a whole city, it can be a whole country, it can be whatever. And when it's constantly you're being in the press, you're being portrayed as this type of a person, or you're being bagged, every game. It's not easy to come out in front of, a stadium of 40, 50,000 people and do well. It's not easy to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the traits that helped me that I've got like in me is that spite that I have in me. And it's like to be honest, in the end, I was better when I preferred. I didn't like people uh, in the end, I didn't like people,
Praising
like
you.
praising me. Didn't like it at all. Still don't. I'd prefer them to say this, and I'll say, you know what, fuck you.
Yeah.
That's the type of. That's when I started off. I wasn't like that.
Yeah.
When I was at Melbourne Knights and all that. But through all those, Melbourne Knights is the situation there. It's not like in Europe. Europe is a
Yeah.
totally different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so basically, at the end of the day, I didn't really like when people, because I knew the next day they'll be bagging me.
Yeah.
And that's what you get used to. After many years of that, you start, developing yourself and standing up for yourself. Because you might, sometimes you have a bad game, sometimes you have a good game, sometimes you miss a sitter, sometimes you score. And like when you see over your whole life, one day these people are loving you and the same people are bagging you the next day when you don't do well. And then you start to realize that, hold on a second, is my only worth as a person or as an individual, as a human being, is whether I do well on a football field or
Yeah. Yeah.
where,
So
where,
spite was important for you. It gave you the fuel. It gave you the fire. It gave you the
yeah,
the
yeah,
the the way to perform. I'll show
yeah,
you. I'll prove you wrong.
yeah. But the only thing is with Spite is Spite's very exhausting. It's
Yeah.
very exhausting.
Yeah.
You got the feeling like you're against the whole world all the time, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do. It's hard the whole. And I'm not like that. I'm not like that as a person normally.
Yeah.
I'm pretty laid back as a person. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. What
but I've
about
got
your?
that feistiness as well.
Yeah, which no doubt helped you, even though it's got the exhausting thing to
Look,
it.
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something which probably many people. First and foremost, every footballer has to have that what is it called? The fighter in him.
Yeah.
Fighter. Like a fighter in him, which means they have to have that competitiveness. That's only if you're a fighter, you've got competitiveness. You're not going to kill over. You've
Yeah.
got to have that inner, like that spite. They've got to have
Yeah.
that in them.
Yeah.
That's why usually people or players of the lower sort of end in the economic sense and from rough, but they usually make good footballers, because
Yeah.
you've got to have that, because essentially football and I don't know about other sports, but I would say for a lot of them, essentially football is a fight. It's a battle, and if you don't win that battle, you can't play.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's what
you
creates
basically,
space. You win that battle against your opposite. It starts to create
yes,
space. Now you can start to play. But it all comes down to those individual battles. Yeah. I never heard
individual
it said like that. Sorry, go.
exactly, individual battles that you have to win, and if you don't win that, you're not going to have that opportunity to play.
Yeah.
You know
You
what I'm
haven't earned the
saying?
right to play. Yeah. You won't
So,
have the ball. You
so
won't have the
it's all
space.
about asserting yourself
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
your opposition,
Yeah.
and to do that, you have to have in you that fight, like be
Yeah.
a fighter, stand up for yourself. You've got to have that in you, that burning, that flame.
And can you tell us how you, like, it may be the answer is spite again, I don't know, but like what about those, what I'm really interested in, those matches or those days when you're really not feeling it, you're not feeling confident, you're not playing well, you've lost the first 10 battles against your immediate opponent. How do you get that in you to go, I'm going again? Like, what did you have something to do that for yourself?
No, again, that's that thing, where you do what you're taught. Sometimes, like sometimes, in some of those games, you have a lucky situation where, I don't know, you get round them or whatever, and you get into a situation maybe where you can score a goal, or where you can, when it's not going for you,
Yeah.
and you have to just keep going in hope that that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't, you can't give up. You're not allowed to,
Yeah.
You know,
So
because
something in you just keeps going. You just keep going back. That's the earlier point. You just keep going back to your
yeah,
process.
you got to
You
just keep going back to what you've been taught and what you do
yeah.
every day.
Were you the type of personality that sort of thought about mistakes a lot, or did you just sort of delete from your head?
Of course, everybody. If you know what, if it means something to you, you think about mistakes. It's hard to delete a mistake because you're constantly reminded of it.
Yeah.
You know, like as people remind me of a mistake I made here in the 90s, they constantly tell me about it here.
Yeah.
You know, it was a goal that I missed, a chance that I missed against Ajax. We played in the Champions League, and Prosinecki cut it back to me, and I hit it, but I didn't hit it properly. It was sort of bouncing a little bit, and I didn't get and Van der Sar was in goals for Ajax, and he saved it, and I got hammered in the press because of that mistake. I got the fans were booing me out in that game, and my own fans, and it just, and even today, somebody the other day when I was in Dubrovnik, somebody mentioned it to me, like, how could you?
Wow.
So those things, they never go away, those things.
Wow.
But
especially if you're getting reminded. Yeah. And I was sort of thinking more in the game, like if you've made a mistake, in the next minute, is it gone? Or are you sort of thinking about that during that game?
Oh no, you think about it.
But
the thing is, for example, when you start off a game, your first few touches of the balls is very, very important. Like if you do it not so good, already a bit of doubt comes into your mind. If your first touch isn't very good, I think with every touch you start getting more confidence. You know what I mean? If it's good.
Yeah, you got to build it. You got to
constantly battling against that yourself, and it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
Mate, the final. I don't want to take too much of your time. This is gold, Mark. I can't thank you enough, mate. This is absolute gold. The final thing I wanted to touch on was Australia World Cup. So 2005, Australia hadn't made the World Cup. I don't know how many years since, not 74, I think. Had a few sort of near misses, felt cursed, wasn't meant to be. We're never going to make the World Cup again.
Yeah.
And then in comes Gus. I've already had I just spoke to Graham Arnold a couple of weeks ago. He's given me his own read on Gus, but I'd love to hear yours. So in comes Gus. He makes you captain. I think he made you captain, right? You weren't captain before Gus.
Yeah,
am I right? Yeah. So Uruguay, two legs. I don't think, from my memory, we were, favourites for that. I think we were expected to lose. Can you just talk us through that, the Gus factor, the feelings during it, what it meant when we qualified? Can you just sort of give a little bit of your perspective on that part of your career?
Well, with Gus, what Gus did really well was that what I was saying before. He trained us to work as a team and to be prepared for every scenario. Up until then, we never did that with the national team. I didn't really do that with many clubs either. And it's like, he had special exercises where, he would play either possession games or one team versus another. And it's so hard to to explain, but it's a way of getting everybody defensively, for example, prepared, that the player on the ball doesn't have much time. The second players come across, helped him out. The third player. So a lot of that shuffling work, which was done in a way through games. He did it. It's not easy to find a good way of doing that. Like making sure that automatically every player, because sometimes a split second of indecision costs you a goal. And that's where Gus was good at. He did a lot of those type of exercises which got rid of that little indecision. And they're the most important things. And that's why as a team, we were very compact. With the way that we played, and I think probably Graham did that in this last World Cup as well. because they looked very similar as well. They looked very compact, you know.
Yeah.
The thing is, so that automatically, when you start playing with that, that builds confidence as well. It's it's that thing of, you know, because you sometimes you have coaches who come to a team and then they think that their only job is to, you know, pick the starting 11. And then they come out and they put the starting 11 out and they say, here guys, that's the formation. What I was saying about formations. Yeah. And the formation is going to be 4-4-2. But what does that mean? What does that mean? You know, what does that mean in a situation when the ball's out on the left side? What does my left back do in that situation? They never define it. A lot of
really.
A lot of them don't.
That's surprising to hear that.
Goose defines stuff.
Right.
He was very defined. That's why we went from a Confederations Cup where in 3 games we copped, I don't know, 12 goals or something. With that same defense, we were very rarely copping goals, you know, to the same thing. So intentionally from defending from the front, from the striker, you know. So in every situation where the ball is here, this is what I want. When the ball is a little bit forward, this is what I want. When all defensively. So he really organized everyone defensively, and it was like a situation where it was automatism. You know, you don't have to think.
Yeah, because you've been drilled. Yeah,
you've been drilled so many times.
Yeah,
there's so many little details you can go into, but you've been drilled so many times. So I'll give you one example. There's for example, you know, if the ball goes, I'm talking defensively. Yeah, you're defending. The team with the ball goes on the right hand side, like almost on the goal line. Usually, in people's mind, a natural reaction is just to drop off, to drop off to in front of the goalkeeper. But that's not a good thing either. You know, you've got to pick somebody up. You can't, you know, like in situations like that, people get a little bit, they think that, you know, it's a natural reaction. I'm dropping off, you know, I'm dropping off. I've done my job. But if you've dropped off and you've left your player free, the guy's going to score if he gets it. You know what I mean? Because you're on the goal line.
So Gus is picking apart that match in 1,000 different situations, and he's getting every single person clear on what their responsibilities in every single and then he's just drilling it, and then he's drilling it, and then he's drilling it. And so by the time the match comes, you're not thinking because you just practiced it so much, all these different situations.
But also the key thing is to do that in game situation. Like you can stand around on a pitch talking about it.
Yeah.
You can, and that's what the mistake a lot of coaches make. You can stand around talking about where everybody should be, but if you don't practice it in a game situation, like at game pace as well,
with pressure,
with everything in a real situation, it's different. Like walking around, you've got no opposition and you're going into position. A lot of coaches do that, but it's not the same level, you know. Because this is like, okay, bang, bang, bang. Because real time is like this, real time.
Yeah.
So you have to try to train exactly what you're going to do in a game in real time, and the exercises Gus did were really good.
That's gold. One story I've heard you say before your return leg in the dressing room, before you're about to walk out against Uruguay, you're down 1-0 after first leg. It sounds like the way you're talking in that interview, you're pretty nervous, and the whole dressing room was nervous. And from what I can gather, I've never met Gus, but it sounds like he was a pretty, you know, hard man and didn't sort of joke around too much. But I've heard stories where he walked into that dressing room and he sort of shifted up his personality a bit, and he was sort of a bit looser and lighter and cracking jokes. And is that true? Do you sort of remember that? Do you remember it that way?
I don't remember. You know, one thing I remembered with those Uruguay games, both of them, was his calmness.
Yeah.
People think that's another thing a lot of fans sort of make a mistake on is that they think that, a coach has to be yelling and screaming and ranting and raving and all that. But a lot of times that actually works against getting respect of the players,
Yeah.
I see a lot of these, especially these days with all the reels and memes and all that sort of stuff about a coach telling off a player or something like that. And, Goose, I'll tell you something. Goose, there were two massive games for us, and he came in and he said, like for his team meetings, they didn't go for a long time. He said, "Look, boys, because you know why they didn't go for a long time? Because he did so much work on the field, like beforehand. So we all knew our jobs.
Yeah."
There was nothing he could say. Oh yeah, by the way, Mark, in that split second, if the ball comes here, you can't do that. There are things that you have to work on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to work on them before. Everybody knows. So everybody knew their jobs. So he would say, he'd come in after, he goes, guys, we all know what we're doing. We know this guy has to pick that guy, this and that. We know all our jobs. And he said, and I remember one thing that stuck in my mind, which was very important, was he goes, look, if we cop a goal, so what? We'll score one. But the way he said it in a calm manner, it's everybody's fear in your head before a game is, oh shit, we can't cop a goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So basically, we just by saying something like that, you sort of relieve everybody's fear in a way, saying, okay, this guy's saying, oh shit, even if we do cop a goal, we just keep doing what we're doing and we're going to score one. We've got the players that can score. You know what I mean? He put calmness into us.
Yeah, basically. He said the right things, but he also said it in the right way. He brought a certain energy that the team needed. The team needed. I'd imagine that there might have been moments when maybe calmness wasn't the word, but he knew. It sounds like he's the sort of coach, and Arnie said this as well. He read the dressing room, he read the energy, and he knew what to give it. And that's another sort of common thing that I'd say you see from these elite coaches. They know what sort of energy to bring. Would you say that was his strength? He knew what to bring into as far as his energy?
Yeah, definitely. No, he was a clever guy in terms of management and that. He was very clever.
Yeah. What do you reckon? If there's one thing that you really sort of learned from him, what do you reckon that is?
Well, you learn. The thing is with us in Australia, especially, we always used to look up to Europeans and how they coach and and everybody just idolizes them just because they're from Europe. A lot of them, which not all of them are that good from Europe. There's all different types. With him, what I learned was that experience that he had, the way that he approached those things in like that, for an example, that the way he approached that experience of actually playing with people's emotions, not playing with them, but like
managing
pushing the
it.
buttons. Like you were saying. That experience is something in Australia we never really did that. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like that. It was not only that, he knew how to, even with the games, with certain things like the flights and all that sort of stuff, these little edges that you get, which us Aussies would say, no, that's not fair. We would never do something like that. But he would, he knew all those little tricks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just generally thought he was a very good coach, very thorough in that preparation section. Not because you've got players who do nothing in coaches, who do nothing in the preparation, but they're motivators, and they motivate teams, but they don't really do that much work with them that's any significance, because there are millions of coaches out there and they all know how to take a session. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can have a coach who doesn't really, he gets the assistant coach to take a session, and the session's not going to make that much difference because it's a routine session. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Gus's sessions were actually designed to
Purposefully,
get people to know their
with a
jobs.
purpose. Yeah, there was a purpose to them. Yeah. Mate, that's gold. That's gold. Mate, I don't know whether you realise it, but that's really, really, there's some really good stuff in this. Really good stuff. Any other coaches? Finally, I'll wrap up soon. Any other coaches that you can sort of reflect on as being really influential on you?
Influential? Not really, to be honest.
Yeah.
In a way of I think Gus was the way he was very impressive the way that he did that. Look, Terry Venables wasn't, but he was like a version of that, but not as sophisticated.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Terry Venables was like in that sort of a way, but he was no way as thorough and as whatever. He did little bits of that, but not to the way that we did it.
Yeah, mate. Thank you so much, Mark. I don't want to take any more of your time.